Hello and welcome to another episode of Attacking Third, a CBS Sports soccer podcast. I'm Sandra Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports, joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, broadcaster and analyst for CBS Sports. On today's episode, we've got a massive show for you all today. We've got a news update of all things NWSL, and of course, we're going to hit you with our NWSL 2023 mock draft. But a quick reminder before we get into everything, the NWSL draft is this Thursday, January 12th, and Attacking Third has you covered. Not only are we going to attend the draft in Philadelphia, but you can download, follow, subscribe, like, and comment on Attacking Third. Subscribe to us on YouTube and give our videos a thumbs up. YouTube.com/Attacking Third. You're going to get exclusive draft content from us, preview, recaps, interviews, everything here on A3. Lisa, good morning. Good morning to everyone in the chat. Good morning. Good morning. Lisa, are you ready to do just a ginormous, a big ass episode? Let's get it in.
It is probably one of the biggest episodes we've done in a long time. Just like a little sneak peek behind the scenes for people joining us on YouTube, welcome in, or listening as a pod. We create rundowns on Google Docs, so we both have access to them. And usually they're about a page, right? Like it's not too much in there. It's more just like headlines that we're going to hit on, like the way we're going to run through the show. Our rundown today is like many pages long because there's just so much that we have to talk about. So much has been happening. It's draft week. NWSL draft is in 2 days. It's in Philadelphia. So all my peeps are coming to town, which I'm so excited about. I've gotten a couple texts from people that are attending the draft, working the draft, asking me where I'm staying, where they're staying. And I'm like, guys, home sweet home for me. I am staying in my bed for this week. And I am so thrilled. As someone that travels constantly, what feels like every single weekend during the NWSL season to call games and to broadcast other things like that. I am just so thrilled that everyone is now coming to me and I get to stay in my bed, my own bed, which is amazing. But I'm really excited for the draft, to see you, to hang out with everyone, and to get a glimpse at the 2023 rookie class in the NWSL and all that they can do.
I am looking forward to, look, let's be real here. The number one thing I'm looking forward to the most is getting into Philly, linking up with you, saying hey, getting the official A3 hug in with you. But I'm excited to reconnect with tons of folks. I know we're not going to be the only ones out there covering this draft, so it's going to be good to see lots of folks in general, and just sort of see the excitement, right, from potential draftees and their families and their friends who are probably joining them for a really big event in their life. And I'm excited that we're gonna I'm excited to do this mock draft because of course we're probably gonna revisit our mock draft and talk about how incorrect we were in terms of the selections and how they went, because anything can happen on draft day. I mean, my goodness, we already had a really big shakeup ahead of the draft that shook things around. I mean, there's a reason why I'm on here rocking my Angel City hat today. They are now the holders of the number 1 selection overall. We're going to chat all about it, but we actually want to make sure that we start off this episode with all of the news portion. We want to make sure that everybody is caught up on everything before we actually do the NWSL mock draft. So for this first half of the episode, we're going to chat all about NWSL news that dropped what felt like all day on Monday yesterday, but really since the last time we've seen anyone since our previous episode. So we really have to start, I think, with the NWSL investigation news. We saw corrective actions and sanctions released and announced by the league in light of the joint team investigations full release in December. And we had wondered, what's that next step, right? What is that official final turning of the page look like for the league as they prepare to really kick off 2023, right? To really take that first step into this next era, this new year. And we saw a lot of things drop, a long list essentially of consequences, by the league in terms of different levels and areas. So we saw across the board a wide range of permanent bans, conditional bans, conditional potential future employment, fines like very, very large, first of their kind types of fines for clubs. So we can just maybe sort of run down these list of things for folks to sort of get caught up. Coaches who are permanently banned, who will no longer ever set foot in NWSL in any capacity. Former head coaches Paul Riley, Christy Holly, Rory Dames, and Richie Burke. Those four people issued permanent bans and will no longer have a place in NWSL. There was also bans for coaches and executives as well, but these are conditional. There's a deadline on them through 2025. So it was interesting to sort of see that level for this one. We saw listed here Craig Harrington, a former Red Stars assistant and former Utah Royals head coach, but also Elise LaHue, a former Chicago Red Stars and then Gotham FC general manager, and then ultimately also held the role of vice president for some time with Gotham FC as well. So the league here in issuing this sanction, saying that future employment is at the discretion of the commissioner, but that those two have to participate in training, amongst other things. But the interesting component for this, for me, Lisa, and as we get into some of these conditional things, there's also an admittance of wrongdoing within some of these categories, which for me, I thought was a very interesting component within this, because I think for some to sort of take a look at that, that could have a perception or be perceived as, basically like an admission of guilt in some capacity. So to sort of see some of these names listed in these sanctions with that really stood out for me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up, because it was almost like 3 different levels of these sanctions. The first one being that these coaches are banned completely, right? As you mentioned, Riley, Holly, Dames, and Burke banned completely and entirely. And then the 2 executives and coaches that are just like banned until 2025. And then other coaches on conditional future employment, meaning that they do have to kind of run through a checklist, a series of things. And one of those being that they have to acknowledge their wrongdoing and accept their personal responsibility for the inappropriate conduct, participating. Then also after they do that, participating in training and demonstrating that they have a sincere commitment to correcting their behavior, which is a quote from the league per their statement. And I thought that part was really interesting. It's not just like you have to pay this money, you have to wait a couple years, then you can come back into this league. There's almost these like moral checkpoints that the league is making these executives do to in order to work back in this league or to work back with a club. And I like that, frankly. It's not just like check a box, do a training class, and check out of it. Because, I mean, in the case of specifically Richie Burke, formerly with Washington Spirit, he didn't admit to anything that he did, right? Like it was more of those top level coaches, but not saying like, yes, like I did this, and instead saying I didn't know there was Jewish people on the team, and so I could make those comments. And like that's just completely absurd and crazy. So the fact that there are these explicit conditions that need to be met in writing for all to see is important, because as the third round of sanctions were listed in this document, basically saying that there were coaches on these conditional future employment, some of them being Fareed Ben-Sidi. He was formerly the head coach at OL Reign. James Clarkson, formerly head coach at Houston Dash. Vera Paul, formerly head coach at Houston Dash before Clarkson. Amanda Cromwell, formerly head coach at Orlando Pride. Sam Green, that was Cromwell's assistant at Orlando Pride. And then Eileen Reese, who was the goalkeeper coach at Orlando Pride. So those people as well must acknowledge their wrongdoing, accept their personal responsibility for the inappropriate conduct, participate in the training, all in order to work again in the league and with the league. And I think that that's like a great little point in all of this, that they have to go through the training. They have to go through a lot in order to want to come back in this league. Now, I don't know if they will. Like, I wouldn't show my face again. Like,
Listen, I think having like these sanctions and some of these within them, some of these conditions, like there has to be a certain amount of training that some of these that some of them have to go through if they want to take a next step into NWSL. But you know, again, the acknowledgement of wrongdoing and accepting personal responsibility
Mhm.
for inappropriate conduct, like these are all, I think, very important things to have included within this, because again, I think if that happens, I think for some of these folks, I mean, we've heard, I mean, we talked about some of these names on here, like where you're mentioning, for coaches, in the section for conditional future employment, Lisa, how you bring up Amanda Cromwell or Sam Green or Elaine Reese, like these are, these are former coaches and staff like that we throughout 2022 had previously spoken about on the show, because we saw things coming out, from that joint team investigation, and some of those
Mhm.
things were probably already communicated. Um,
Right.
to these former Pride, Orlando Pride coaches. And we saw reaction and some sort of fallout around that. I mean, Amanda Cromwell going public and saying that she's going to seek legal counsel. And it's like, here it
Yeah.
is, like legal, it is just kind of like, okay, well, is there going to be that acknowledgement of wrongdoing? Is there going to be that acceptance of personal responsibility for
And does it
inappropriate
have to
conduct?
be, I think it's also, like, interesting, does it have to be public, right? Does Amanda Cromwell, she went out with that statement, "Hey, I'm gonna seek personal, lawyers to combat this." Does she have to put out a public statement on social media or wherever saying, "Hey, I admit to all of this"? Like, probably not. It probably just has to be, like, behind closed doors, but I think that's something interesting as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then look, we have to get into the club's fined portion of this a little bit more. Um, uh, Listen, I don't know what folks were anticipating when it came to these sanctions, but looking at some of these numbers attached to some of these clubs, you're like, wow, that is
Woo!
like a historically large fine for this league, right? So Chicago Red Stars with the largest of those at 1.5 million, Portland Thorns with 1 million, Racing Louisville 200,000, North Carolina Courage 100,000, OO Reign 50,000. Gotham FC, previously Sky Blue, at 50,000. In addition to those fines, North Carolina and Louisville will be required to hire a sporting staff, coaches, and general managers that will be completely different from the men's team. So, automatically putting in an additional sanction on them, making sure that the staff for their women's team is required to report directly to ownership. And I think looking at the Chicago Red Stars and Portland Thorns, when we're looking at those really, really big numbers, it's interesting to sort of, again, look back at some of the news that you and I had to cover in 2022 and see that $1 million price
Yeah,
tag on this sanction, and knowing now that Maren Paulson's $1 million quote unquote donation for a safety task force probably is tied to this $1 million
for sure.
fine.
Yeah,
So
for
it was
sure. I
interesting to
mean,
see that drop.
yeah, very interesting to see that drop because between the teams that were issued fines, there were five of them, as Sandra just mentioned: Chicago, Portland, Louisville, North Carolina, OL Reign, and Gotham. Six of them, excuse me. Then North Carolina and Racing, they also have caveats in this. So that is 8 of the 10 teams that were in the NWSL in 2021, and then moving backwards, right? But most recently, so some people are wondering, even people in our chat, hey, what about Washington? What about Chris Ward? Washington Spirit and Kansas City Current were not fined because Washington Spirit ended up selling to their new owner in Michelle Kang. And there was no evidence against Kansas City Current that they retaliated against the players for raising concerns about the mistreatment. So that's why those two clubs are not fined. But with all this money, right? Like we have this conversation vaguely in the league about, hey, what are salary caps right now for the leagues? We don't know at this point, but like when you look at these fines, $1.5 million, $1 million, 200,000, 100,000, $50,000, where is this money going? What's happening with this? And per the league, the NWSL stated that these fines are going to be used to further the systemic reformation and to directly have positive impacts in the lives of the players, which maybe it's going to cover some of the investigation costs. Maybe it's going to cover some costs of growing safety in the sport or growing positions in the league that provide safety and transparency, funding the salaries of some of those positions. So I thought that was an interesting point in the release, that the league basically saying, hey, what are we going to use all this money for? It's not just for us to grow and make the league better, but it's actually to give back to the players and to continue to protect them. The money's going to go in a cycle to hopefully continue to do good and protect these players moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that's important to know, because I think whenever we talked about, are the next steps, what do those next steps look like for this league moving forward, it has to include that. And Commissioner Berman has been pretty vocal about that, in terms of ensuring that they continue to maintain great relationships with the Players Association, ensuring that there's still that player-first, player-led kind of initiatives that remain moving forward for this league. It was good to see within this announcement, how they're going to continue to prioritize that for the players, and Players Association Executive Director Megan Burke saying that the true accountability is found in the actions that have been taken thus far, and just importantly in the choices people in positions of power make moving forward. Now is the time to realize the transformation, right? So it sort of feels like this is that sort of that bookend to this very, very long kind of 2 years, within the NWSL, and we'll see, now that these things are in place, now that you have policies in place, now that you have the procedures in place, you have to allow those things to do their job, right? Allow those policies exist, and now those policies need time to do their job. So it was certainly a big news drop in terms of the league, and we were happy to cover that. But believe it or not, this wasn't the NWSL sanctions and corrective actions was not what really kicked off the news cycle this week. No. It was a big free agency signing, and one that we are so excited to talk about, which honestly I haven't stopped talking about since it dropped on Monday. But we got to talk about Debinha, because it is official. Debinha has signed with the Kansas City Current. The Brazilian international and 6-year veteran of the league inked a 2-year contract with Kansas City Current with an option for 2025. Lisa, this was our number one biggest prime star target of the free agency period. Please hit me with your reactions when you saw this news drop.
I love that Debinha is going to Kansas City. I love what the Current is building with their club, with all of the advancements they're doing off the pitch with their training facility, their first female soccer dedicated stadium, the players that they're acquiring. I mean, Kansas City won the free agency, hands down. They started with Vanessa DiBernardo, Morgan Gautral, and they end up with Debinha. Just incredible strength in the midfield. I am so curious to see how the midfield sets up for Kansas City and how they play together, right? Because we've seen Debinha in the same system in the NWSL for so long, a box midfield where she has the freedom to do whatever the heck she wants and move into the attack. And we saw that development last year at North Carolina between Debinha and Caroline, where they really had this free-flowing movement to move forward and to drop back however they pleased. Now playing alongside for Debinha, playing at Kansas City alongside some more structural midfielders in Lola Bonta that has a lot of freedom herself, and Vanessa DiBernardo and Morgan Gautral and Desiree Scott, right? We still haven't heard from her what's happening. I am so curious to see what Kansas City looks like, but Kansas City wins the free agency, hands down, because this was the biggest player on the free agency list, as a 6-year veteran in the league, someone that is in the prime of her career, has found so much success formerly at North Carolina and Kansas City as the runner-ups in 2022 of the NWSL Championship, they're making a statement, and signing Debinha was one of the biggest statements they could have made.
It's a splash. We got to get in the water puns, Lisa.
I know.
Okay. Look, I'm with you. Kansas City Current. I think if we're talking about putting grades on it, A plus, 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 plus. I think for the first ever free agency period that exists in NWSL history, you're looking at the Current in terms of who they signed, and they already had made headlines nabbing not just one, but two of the elite midfielders on that free agency list in Morgan Gautrat and Vanessa DiBernardo. And then despite all of the rumors, despite all of some of the reporting out there tying Debinha to certain areas of the globe, whether it was overseas, this is a player that had international interest, right? There was a very real possibility, I'm sure, that a player like her may have made her exit from the NWSL. When we were talking about free agency and we were talking about this player being our number one target, that was one of the things for me when I was looking at somebody like Debinha. Is this a player who was looking at her career and looking at the last 6 years of her life in the NWSL, and was she going to say, hey, you know, I've done it all here.
Different. Yeah.
I don't have anything left to prove in NWSL. I have absolutely dominated this league. I've got to go and you know, rack them up somewhere else. I thought maybe that was going to be something that perhaps persuaded this player to maybe make that leap overseas. And we heard it, Arsenal, Barcelona, Paris Saint-Germain, I think Manchester United, and people were throwing out Chelsea in there.
Everyone wanted her.
Juventus, you know, at one point, it was and I almost felt like an endless list. And then for NWSL, we really just heard about Orlando. You know,
that was the most recent.
That was the most recent, but I would argue that there were far more NWSL clubs in the mix for this player. I think the little bit of the surprise element for some people that it was Kansas City should probably signal that there absolutely were multiple teams in the NWSL in the running for the Debinha sweepstakes. But it was cool to sort of see this news get dropped, sort of see her reaction, or Debinha's reaction to making the choice for Kansas City as well.
I agree. I think her reaction to it was very special to see, and kind of the reasoning why she chose to go to Kansas City. And it was because she liked what they were doing there. She liked what they were building. She liked everything that they had going on, what they were doing off the pitch with their training facilities and their new stadium and their commitment to the sport, commitment to the professionalism of the sport. Those are things that's how you get one of the top talents in the world. When a club, and every single club wants her throughout Europe, throughout the States, that's how you get her. I mean, when you look at Debinha's accolades, right, you said it best, Sandra, she had checked off everything on the list in the NWSL to do. So the only way an NWSL team was going to keep her here is if they offered her something that no other club could offer her. And when you look at her list of accolades, exactly, Sandra's giving the money signs out there, but when you look at her list of accolades, two-time NWSL champion, Challenge Cup champion, two-time Challenge Cup MVP, NWSL MVP, three-time Shield winner, women's ICC champion. I mean, this player has everything under the sun. So what else could you possibly offer her? I think it comes down to ownership and leadership of a team and kind of who you're going to work with. That's one of the biggest benefits of free agency. You get to pick who your coach is going to be, who your specialist is going to be, and where you're going to live. I don't think location comes that much into it at this point. And then it comes down to money. And Kansas City is a team that is not messing around with their message of why they want to be the best and why getting to the NWSL championship in their second year was not good enough, and they want to win. And that's the statement that Kansas City made.
Well, you know what? I would also make, I would add an additional argument to that there very impressive 2022 run to the NWSL Championship actually became part of their pitch for probably some of these free agents that they landed. I think if you want to get more of my takes, I wrote them all out on the trade at CBSSports.com, so you can go see what I had to say about Debinha's arrival to Kansas City there. But that was one of the things that I brought up in that piece as well. I think the fact that they went on that very, very long run all the way through to the championship final. I mean, they had a 13-game undefeated streak at one point during the season. These are all things that help you as a franchise make those type of pitches to those very desirable candidates, whether you're trying to nab them up out of free agency, whether you're trying to, talk about, potential trades. That is important. I think more than anything, when you're looking at these players who have been in this league for a certain amount of years, they don't want to go to any old team. They want to go to a contender. And that is very important for Kansas City, that they had that very successful run and that they have done a good job of sort of retaining a lot of the pieces from that championship finals appearance. I mean, they have the goalkeeping position locked up. This wasn't just a really strong free agency period for this franchise, but their GM Cabby Leviton made a lot of great moves in terms of being able to make multiple resignings. We saw the resigning of Keito Fava. We saw Alex Loera get another contract extension. They announced Haley Mace is going to remain in Kansas City as well. So these are all integral pieces for this franchise moving forward. And you loop those type of re-signings in with these type of free agency acquisitions. I don't know how you don't look at Kansas City right now and say they're not contenders.
They are completely contenders. They have to be. I want to give a shout out to people joining us live on YouTube right now in our chat, because some of these comments are amazing. You guys are making me crack up. Lucy saying, hey, congratulations to Kansas City Current on their 2023 NWSL Championship. And Woods, Kansas City's already looking good. Giving a shout out to Debinha, Eat, Sleep, Repeat. I mean, Casey is a powerhouse. Debinha, Mewis, Williams. I mean, even without Mewis and Williams, right? We don't know the status of Sam Mewis right now, but Williams is working her way back. She's in the U.S. January camp. It's Debinha, DiBernardo, Catral, Scott, Keito Fava. This is crazy. I mean, VU saying Casey isn't playing. They're going to be balling this season completely. I think Kansas City just gained a lot of new fans, right? I mean, as you mentioned, the 2022 year for Kansas City gained them a lot of traction. People were like, oh, this is an underdog team. This is a team that's having fun. They've got crazy celebration. What else? And in order to continue to grasp the attention and to grow their fan base as well, this is a power move for them to get Debinha. I'm thrilled to watch next year. I even saw some people on Twitter talking about how they've got to get out to Kansas City this year. They've got to see a game and they've got to see this team play in person. Hey, that's how you grow the league.
Out,
so I'm all for it.
Out. Just at me. I think I was one of those people. I was like, you know what? I'm here in Chicago. That's just a little.
It's not that far, Sandra.
Drive.
You can get down there. So yeah, I'm calling you out. Let's get to a Kansas City game this year. I'll be there. I'll come with you. It'll be great. We'll make our way there. I love that.
The Midwesterner in me was like, yeah, it's just a little like 8 to 9 hour drive. It's cool. Like anybody could, you could just get there just in a day. It's fine.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. I think for me, I think I don't want to speak for you. I think maybe for us though, for the free agency period that we've been tracking it for as long as we have, I think this was a player that everybody had their eyes on, and it's so cool to sort of finally see the landing spot and sort of see how, talk about everything that sort of led up to this point. And now we get to talk about, what that means for this club and how this type of player can sort of fit in and what does that mean for, the roster as a whole moving forward. I mean, there's a bit of a reunion here with former North Carolina Courage players, whether it's Debinha and Lynn Williams, Kristen Hamilton. We have to include Sam Mewis in that, although there's a lot of question marks around there. What does that mean for this midfielder, and what place does Sam Mewis have in it, if at all? Right, this is a player that only Sam Mewis knows. What's where she's at in her recovery process, and I think everyone has to continue to respect the player in that time. So we'll see. I think preseason there will be more that comes out in terms of the picture and what this looks like for the team positionally moving forward. But believe it or not, there was still more news that dropped on Monday. Congratulations to the Portland Thorns naming their head coach, Mike Norris, officially head coach of Portland Thorns. was an assistant on the squad in 2022. The Newcastle, England native is now going to be running things in an official capacity for the Thorns.
Yeah, huge announcements coming out of Portland because they've been without a head coach now and heading into a draft week. The fact that this dropped on Monday of a draft week means that Mike Norris will be involved in what's happening on Thursday at the NWSL draft. I mean, has a lot of previous accolades. He was with Canada's women's national team in Tokyo when they won gold at the 2021 Olympics. He's helped coach youth teams in Canada. He's from England. I know Karina LeBlanc, the GM of Portland Thorns, made a little joke about that during the press conference. Like, hey, just wait till you hear him talk. You can't understand a word he says. He's got a pretty heavy accent. But I think one of the coolest things after this announcement came from the Thorns on their social media was the response from Portland Thorns players. Sophia Smith, just a number of players speaking out on Twitter saying how happy they were for Mike Norris to be getting this head coaching role at Portland and how excited they were to continue working with him. He was one of the coaches, the assistant coaches for Rian Wilkinson last year that really did a lot of like the scouting report. And a lot of times, like, from my experience with scouting reports and with coaches that do them, they have this more of like personal side because they need to know individual players on their own team and what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, who they're going to match up with. And that way they can scout their opposition correctly. And then they go directly to those players and say like, hey, Sophia Smith, you're going up against this back line. This is where they struggled. This is really their only weakness. They're good in the air. They're fast on the ground. They're pretty physical, but if you check back in front of them, that's how you're going to find the advantage. So scouting reports and scouting coaches work really closely with the players. So it's good to see that Mike Norris has a really good relationship already built up with the current players at Portland. And I'm hoping that that just continues to move on and to rotate through because it's a big year for Portland. They're looking to repeat again and get back to the championship. Across the league, though, there was a little bit of other news, front office news, specifically with the Chicago Red Stars promoting Michelle Lomnicki to their general manager position. She's been with the club for what feels like forever, Sandra.
Yeah, it's cool. I thought, when the news dropped, my immediate take on it was I'm really happy that the associate title has been removed for this role and for Lomnicki specifically. She was named as an associate general manager under Arnold Whistler's time in a year in which they were already trying to perhaps, change some things at the executive level and the front office level. But it was an extra tag to a title where it was like, okay, so this is associate general manager. So this means, who else is actually making these decisions? So to see that come off, I thought was very refreshing and well-deserved, honestly. Because this is someone who's been with the Red Stars organization since its very, very, very early days in the NWSL specifically. And prior to moving into this role, had already had a different role, but as director of camps and clinics, right? So on the youth side of things for the Red Stars. So along with playing as a defender for this club in 2009 and in the NWSL from 2013 to 2015, now in an executive role. And one of the things that isn't lost on me is the fact that when it comes to certain roles in this league, that this position, I would imagine, is probably the hardest job in the NWSL right now. I think when you're looking at the current state of the Chicago Red Stars, the title of general manager, I think, is probably a very challenging one. So the fact that you not only have someone who has familiarity with the club, is a former player herself, and has already done a lot of work, has already laid a lot of groundwork and laid a lot of blueprint down. Not only is she, making the choice to stay, she's done a lot of work and wants to stay. I think that's also very important to take a look at
that's
in
special.
this role. So, this is a club that has lost a lot of regular names, a lot of usual suspects. And anytime I think that they can convince someone who's already done a lot of work to stay and continue to do more work with this club, I think is a win for them. So it was cool to sort of see that get announced. And then they also announced the signing. So she's very hard at work. Addie McCain signed through the waiver wire for the Chicago Red Stars. So they have added a midfielder to the mix in Chicago Red Stars ahead of the draft.
They need some. They need some. So hey, it's a great move. I know. I like how Chicago Red Stars social media like promoted that. It was like, hey, we've got a new GM, and then it was like, and she's already hard at work, like signing Addie McCain through the waiver wire. McCain was with Kansas City for a bit, saw some time, but hey, a good pickup by Chicago. Why not? You need some midfield. You might as well strengthen it where you can with someone like McCain that has experience in the league and playing. In the Midwest, especially.
Yeah, still a young player, and I think that's probably going to be the way they operate for a little while, making sure you're getting young players who are probably looking for more playing time and want to continue to sort of grow with in organization. So we'll see what the draft looks like for them, but we have to close out this first half of the segment with some awards. Congratulations are in order for Jaden Shaw, who won the U.S. Soccer Young Player of the Year award, and Sophia Smith was named U.S. Soccer Player of the Year. Remember when this dropped, Lisa, you and I were texting each other. We were so excited about it. Sophia Smith, the first Black woman to be given this award in the U.S. Soccer, United States Women's National Team 38-year history. Big deal.
This is a huge deal. Huge deal. I mean, when we saw the nominees for Female Player of the Year and Sophia Smith was on there, it was kind of like, okay, like she's gonna win, right? Like she has to win this award. And I am so glad she did, because it's a huge accomplishment for a player like Smith, and it's so well deserved. 22 years old, the youngest player to lead the United States in scoring since 1993, youngest ever NWSL MVP. It just had a tremendous year. And I think the evolution of this player also comes into play for being the player of the year, right? Like she came out of college and into the league and started to make splashes, and she was making a name for herself. But in 2022, she really implemented herself in United States soccer, right? Across the NWSL, of course, but this is a U.S. Soccer Female Player of the Year award. So it's not just what you do with your club, but it's mostly what you do with your country. But you got to do what you do with your club to be able to do what you do for your country. So the fact that she did it so consistently for Portland Thorns and then for the United States, this is a player that was so fun to watch. So fun to watch. And at 22 years old, Sandra, we're only going to see more from this player. And that's so exciting, because the future is so bright for someone like Sophia Smith. And you also mentioned Jaden Shaw, 18 years old. This is a player that NWSL fans know very well. She went through the discovery process. She trained with Washington Spirit and ended up being selected by San Diego Wave and Casey Stoney. Then she ended up making history, right? At just 17 years old, she checked into her very first game with San Diego. And within 30 minutes of checking into the game, she scored her first goal, and she became the youngest player at age 17 to score in her first NWSL match. But with international soccer and U.S. soccer, had just a tremendous run with the U20 team and the Women's World Cup. This is a player that is really fun to watch. I'm so thrilled that we get to watch Jaden Shaw in the NWSL. I'm waiting for her call up, right, to the senior team to see when she gets in that mix. But there's a lot of talented players out there. So a huge accomplishment for Jaden Shaw.
Yeah, I remember when we spoke about it and we were going through the list of nominees, there were like two very clear winners for these two awards, and we both talked about Shaw. We both talked about Smith, that coming off of the year that they were coming off of, that they had to be the locks for these awards. So I'm glad that it turned out that way, because I don't want to know what it would have been like if it would have gone differently. So congratulations are in order to them. Very excited to see what is next for these two players in U.S. soccer. And we're going to be right back after a quick break. Believe it or not, we have a mock draft still to do for everyone. So stay with us.
This is war, and we're up.
We knew this day might come.
Doesn't make it any easier.
The North Koreans came pouring over the 38th parallel.
Those boys are holding on by their fingernails. And they need what only we can give them.
Ready, set, hit it!
We're gonna give them hell.
Devotion, rated PG-13, now streaming on Paramount+.
All right, let's talk NWSL 2023 draft. The draft's kicking off Thursday, January 12th. It's right around the corner. It's going to be taking place in Philly, right at the Philadelphia Convention Center as part of the United Soccer Coaches Convention. Listen, we've already had a bit of madness shake things up for the official draft order ahead of the NWSL draft. Makes me a little nervous. It makes me wonder, like, if we're going to have any other surprises or quick changes for the draft. We always do, right?
I think we will.
Listen, having covered a few of these already in person and in virtual capacities, there's always something that happens that shakes things up. But we did an episode about the massive 4-team trade, talked about how the draft picks were in part of that trade. So now the draft order looks a little bit different. Shout out to Angel City. They are now the official holders of the number 1 pick overall in the 2023 draft that was acquired from Gotham FC via that 4-team deal. New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC are now making their selection at number 2. That pick came from Orlando as part of that multi-team trade. Orlando Pride still sitting at number 3. Racing Louisville at number 4. Portland Thorns acquired the number 5 slot from Angel City in a trade. And number 6 belongs to North Carolina Courage. And number 7, Chicago Red Stars. Houston Dash will select at number 8. North Carolina Courage at number 9. And Kansas City Current at number 10. North Carolina Courage once more at 11. And Portland Thorns will be closing out this first round at number 12. So, Lisa, does this change things for you in terms of like what we were talking about in our previous draft board episode? We talked about, one of the things we talked about specifically was Orlando having 2 picks in this first round.
Yeah.
And then we got this multi-team trade deal. We talked about like, hey, anything could happen, but do we want to see Orlando keep those picks? And you said, hey, like, I'd like to see them keep both of them and maybe make back-to-back picks here. But now things have shaken up a little bit. What do you think of this order here?
So I did initially say I wanted Orlando to keep their double picks at 2 and 3, just because of what Orlando needs, right? Where they need to really shore up their roster. However, after the 4-team trade went down between Portland, Angel City, Gotham, and Orlando benefited so much from that trade by gaining so much money. And because of that, they end up losing or trading away their number 2 pick to Gotham, which still leaves them the number 3 pick. So I'm okay with it. I am okay with it. I know I wanted them to have both, but I think Orlando getting the money is probably a really good even trade-off for still keeping that top 3 spot, right? They're still number 3 in the draft. And when you look at the draft class that is being laid out for us in 2023, there's a lot of top talent. And despite who goes number 1 and number 2 in the draft, Orlando Pride can pick up pretty much anyone across any line, and they will be useful for this team. So I think it's okay that Orlando stuck with number 3. I think that the power move from Angel City to get that number 1 spot, like clearly that's what they wanted. With all the trades that happened between Yasmin Ryan coming to Angel City and then going to Gotham and then making all these trades, Angel City wanted the number 1 pick, and they did it. They made it happen with 3 different teams. Fantastic for them. And I think that having Angel City be number 1, it puts them in a really great position to control their destiny for this draft and control maybe the future of their destiny, because this is a team that, of course, every team wants to do well. Every team wants to get back to the playoffs. But I think the expectation around a club like Angel City was to get to the playoffs in the first year, was to be this powerhouse. And they didn't. They fell flat of that. So maybe the pressure's on a little bit. It was like, okay, we've got to get number 1. and they did it. So with Angel City, Gotham, Orlando, Racing, and Portland as the first 5, I think that's pretty interesting, especially with Portland being number 5. That's like a massive trade up for Portland, because as a team that wins the NWSL championship, you usually don't see them that high. So I think that's a pick and a team that I'm interested to see who they get.
I'm with you 100%. Let's maybe run. Let's
Yeah.
keep running through this draft order in this first round, because when we're talking about, we want to do a mock draft here on Attacking Third, we're going to do these first 12 picks, and I'm so excited to do this alongside you, Lisa, because one of my favorite things that we do here at A3 is make our predictions or make our picks, and I love doing that because I love coming back on these episodes and talking about how incorrect we were. So let's see where we think the draft is going to take us. At number 1 is Angel City. And listen, there's already been a lot of news around this pick. There was a multi-team trade that took place to make sure Angel City was landed in this number 1 spot. And alongside of that trade reporting, there was the news that Alyssa Thompson was a target for this franchise. And this was before the official January 9th deadline was completed, and before Alyssa Thompson had even declared for draft registration. But now, as we're about 2 days away from this draft, Alyssa Thompson is officially registered for the NWSL draft, and all signs point to selecting her at number 1 here.
Completely. I mean, when all the rumors swirled from the LA Times saying that Angel City wanted number 1 just so they could get Alyssa Thompson, it was almost like a caveat. There was an asterisk because Alyssa Thompson had yet to register at that point. Of course, by that evening, this was last Friday, I believe all this happened. Or last Thursday, excuse me. By that evening, Alyssa Thompson had registered for the draft. Her name was submitted. So she's going to go number 1 overall to Angel City. She's a forward, 18 years old. She committed to Stanford at 15 years old, but has since rescinded that, now entering the draft and making her debut in the NWSL as an 18-year-old. She also has a couple caps under the senior national team. This is a name that you're going to get to know very quickly if you don't already. But for sure, Alyssa Thompson going number 1 to Angel City. And I think it's a good pickup for them, right? Like to add a little bit of depth into their front line. We saw a lot of injuries last year that Angel City suffered, whether it was Kristen Press and her ACL or Sydney LaRue after being traded from Orlando. This is a team that needs depth in that position, and for a player that could potentially be out a lot due to international windows, I think getting her in and experienced, especially in LA, is going to be huge for Thompson.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I was going to ask you that. I was going to say, like, positionally, for this Angel City team, is this a selection that makes sense for you? And it sounds like you agree with it, that you're down with this. All right.
I do. I think it does make a little bit more sense just because we saw Freya Coombe not rotate a lot last year, right? Especially in her midfield. So to get a midfielder for Angel City, I think would be beneficial for them, but I don't think they would get a lot of playing time. And I think a condition perhaps for Alyssa Thompson to join the league was like, hey, I want to play, right? Like, you want to play. Yeah. So you don't want to be one of those, you don't want to be a number 1 draft pick that sits on the bench and gets 15 minutes at the end of the game.
Yeah, listen, I don't think you're Angel City and you make the move to land this pick, because let's go back to this trade a little bit and walk through some of the steps. Angel City traded with Portland first. There was Yasmin Ryan was the player involved, and money was involved. And then there was the trade with Angel City, and even more allocation money was involved along with Yasmin Ryan. So you're telling me that you're spending nearly $500,000 for a number 1 pick in Alyssa Thompson. We're talking $450,000-ish here, right? To make this selection and to not play this player, listen.
I know.
I think we're going to see Alyssa Thompson in 2023.
I hope we do.
And I hope that we do. And listen, I think if you have this player available, declared for the draft at number 1, you absolutely take Thompson. And yes, is she going to need time to adapt to the professional level, especially a league like NWSL where it's very fast, right? Very transitional, very fast paced, can be very physical at times. I think more than ever, you want to get this young player acclimated as quickly
Also,
as you can.
I don't think
So
she's going
I'm
to need
excited
that
about
much.
it.
I don't think she's going to need that much adjustment. She's been playing with boys teams 2 years older than her. She's already had caps internationally against England, against Spain. I think her transition is going to be pretty smooth. I think the biggest transition for her is going to be playing under a Freya Coombs system and playing along certain players where she's maybe not the superstar anymore, and has to fit a role a little bit more versus having the freedom to do whatever she wants.
I'm with you. Number 2, New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC, number 2 overall selection. Would anticipate that they are going to go with what is they perceive as the best available player at this position. But we believe that they're going to go with Michelle Cooper, the forward out of Duke University at number 2, 21 years old, finished her sophomore season at Duke, was the Mack Herman Trophy winner, and made some folks nervous. We didn't see Michelle Cooper on this registration list immediately, but she's there now, and we would anticipate that Gotham makes that selection at number 2.
Yeah, I think that Gotham, it would really behoove them to go with a player like this. Gotham needs to score goals, right? I mean, they had a lot of problems in 2022, but I think that it's a really easy answer to say, hey, you got to score goals. And I think that Gotham could shore up across any line of their roster. So they're going to go with the highest pick, and that's going to be Michelle Cooper at this point. I mean, she ended her season in November with Duke and then decided she was no longer returning, which just made a lot of eyeballs bright and widen to see where this player was going to go. Duke ended up losing in the quarterfinal to Alabama, in which Michelle Cooper had a brace in that loss to Bama. The U20 U.S. captain, she was the Golden Boot winner and the Golden Ball winner in the CONCACAF qualifying tournament. She scored 8 goals, so she can do it at the international level. Now seeing how she fits into Gotham and their system, but she's going to go high, and I think she's going to go number 2 over Gotham.
I'm with you. Let's go to number 3. Orlando Pride have their original selection at number 3. And we at A3 believe that they're going to go with Izzy Diakia out of Santa Clara, the forward who racked up 50 goals and 14 assists over the course of her collegiate career. But listen, when you have those top 3 picks in the draft, I think a lot of the energy on these mock boards is, hey, you want to take that best available talent across the board. And I think you and I maybe want to make a case for a midfielder for Orlando Pride, that maybe that is the position that they should be targeting. But even though that's the position that they might have to target, that's perhaps the team need, we just feel like if Izzy Diakia is on this board, that they're going to go with her at number 3.
I do. I mean, even when you look at someone like Izzy Diakia, this is a player that is traditionally played forward with Santa Clara. In the draft, I think she also registered as a midfielder. So she has a lot of freedom. She has a lot of versatility, which is why we kept her at number 3 for Orlando Pride, even though we both think that Orlando could use more of a midfield player. I also think that someone like Clara Roberts, midfielder out of Florida State, would be a really good pick for Orlando. But I just don't foresee someone like Clara Robbins going this high. And when you have someone like Diakia on the board, you're going to pick her at this point. And with Orlando Pride losing their number 2 spot, this is their pick in the first round draft. You have to go high at this point. It's not like they've got another pick at 9-10 in this first round. They don't. So with Orlando Pride, I think they have to stick with the forward out of Santa Clara. She can drop deeper into the midfield. I mean, she's going to add to your game with everything that she can do. She's been a national champion. She's been in the College Cup 2 times with Santa Clara during her career. All-American first team, WCC Offensive Player of the Year in her senior year. A lot of accolades for this player, and she's going to add to Orlando's team.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think when you're looking at players, best players available, this is one of those players, and I would anticipate Debinha stays at number 3 if she's still on the board here. I think it's important that you noted that she did also sort of have the forward and midfielder registration attached to her
Yeah.
going into this draft, but and making the case for somebody like a Clara Robbins, I think, who's more just like that pure midfielder, which is why we think at number 4 for Racing Louisville FC, we think that Clara Robbins might go to Louisville or stay with Louisville, question mark. The midfielder out of Florida State University. For folks who are unaware, Clara Robbins has spent some time in the USLW League with Racing Louisville side, made some pretty impressive appearances, 10 matches, racked up 4 goals and assists. Really, really good showing, I think, during a brief time with this side, whether it was, going up against the Indy 11 or Kings Hammer FC, all those other great clubs in USLW League. So someone who has coming out of a fantastic program in Florida State University, but also has this added layer to her with a handful of games with the USLW League. So I think when we're also looking at, yes, at this point in the first round, who are those best players available to make at these very early selections? But perhaps if you're a certain team with very, very heavy needs like Louisville, they need players who could probably come in and slot in immediately. You're also looking for players who are quote unquote NWSL ready, right? Maybe players who aren't going to need that much time to get acclimated. And I think if you're looking at a certain position on the pitch, if you're looking at that middle third, I think Clara Robbins is the most midfield ready player to go in this first round.
I agree. She is totally midfield ready. I think that's a really good way to put it. And when you look at Racing Louisville and kind of the roster that they've built up, they have a midfield that is very young. You look at Jalen Howell, Savannah DeMello, Lauren Millay, who sometimes slots into that midfield. This is Lauren Millay being one of the most veteran ones with just a few years in the league under her belt. So adding in someone else like Clara Roberts could seem a bit dangerous for Kim Bjorkegren and Racing Louisville, but I think that bringing someone from Virginia into this team, Florida State University, she has experience playing at Louisville. I think that's what gives her a really big upper hand. She's won a national championship in 2018 when she was young on this FSU team. And when she finished in 2022 at FSU, she finished with 110 games played. That was the most in Florida State history and the second most in women's college soccer history. So she's played a crap ton of games. And I think that experience will really lend to what she can bring to Racing Louisville. I'll be interested to see, though, how she fits into what they're doing in the midfield. And I could see her she's a midfielder, but she has also played defense later in her career or in other stages. So to see her dropped into the back line, perhaps for Kim Bjorkegren, I think that could be a benefit too.
We'll see if Bjorkegren has that vision in this selection. I think this is an area of the draft, though, where maybe we could get the potential for another shakeup. Maybe this middle portion of the table is where we start to see some trades again. I feel like Portland Thorns already made the move to try to get in higher into this draft, and maybe they humor Racing Louisville to negotiate another trade, because we are looking at a player in this middle selection at number 5 in Emily Madrill, the defender out of Florida State University, but has played overseas in Sweden. Again, when we're talking about players who are potentially NWSL ready, we're talking about Clara Robbins, and of course, we're also including Emily Madrill within that same conversation as well. Do we see a swap? Does Racing Louisville say, hey, we've got some midfielders who are locked up here, but we really have our eye on Clara Robbins, and we're thinking that we're going to take her at number 4. Maybe we get into a trade here with Portland Thorns, who perhaps also need to make a selection for a defender. So it's interesting that in number 4 and in number 5, there's a similar team need here for going with a defender, and what's it going to look like within these two positions. But if things shake out, there's the potential for somebody like Emily Madrill to go number 5 to Portland Thorns, who, look, they've got Becky Sauerbrunn, they've got Emily Menges. I think it's pretty evident that
Kelly Hubley
got next. I mean, she is the player that you want to make sure you continue to build within that back line at the center back position. Who else are you bringing in to ensure that you have depth at this role? I think you're looking at somebody like Emily Madrill.
I agree completely. I think it's interesting you talk about the shakeup. I mean, this was Emily Madrill is a player that I think before we had the draft list and before we knew what was really happening with Michelle Cooper saying that she's going to join, Alyssa Thompson saying that she's going to enter the draft, Emily Madrill is a player that I think would have gone higher perhaps than 5 if it wasn't for some of these superstar forwards coming in Thompson and Cooper and Izzy Diakia. But Emily Madrill, a tremendous player, a tremendous defender, formerly with Florida State, and who has the professional experience because she's been playing overseas in Sweden. And I think that gives a huge upper hand to a team like Portland Thorns. I'm honestly like a little shocked that we have Madrill so low, right, at 5. I'm putting quotes around that, but it's more on team's need at this point. And although she is one of the top defenders in this entire draft, and we saw a defender go number 1 last year, the year before in Emily Fox, last year in Naomi Girma. I don't think it's unusual to see a defender go this high, but based on teams' needs, the forwards are going to go first. And that leaves Emily Madrill to this 5 spot. And I think her going to Portland Thorns would be incredible for her career. Imagine the development of a player like Emily Madrill learning underneath someone like a Becky Sauerbrunn, a Kelly Hubley who's gone through the fight of it, playing in front of a Bella Bigsby, right? Playing with and against someone in training like Sophia Smith. I think the development for Madrill is going to be most beneficial at Portland.
Look, I think going with Madrill, I think anywhere between 1 to 5 will probably be a potential landing spot for this player. This is a player that I think has been on multiple teams' radars for probably over the last 2 years, honestly. But we'll see where she ends up landing. I mean, shout out to San Diego Wave, right? They went the defender route. They chose defender number 1 overall in Naomi Girma. So we'll see if that's a similar energy in this year's draft. Number 6, North Carolina Courage. We're going the forward route for them. No Debinha. They got to make sure that they continue to have a dynamic attack. We think that they might choose a forward at this slot. We're going with Alexa Spantra out of Virginia for North Carolina Courage. They've got another pick in this draft, so we'll talk about perhaps both of these moves later at number 10. Let's also talk about number 7's selection with Chicago Red Stars. Lisa, when we were talking about certain team needs out of this draft, Chicago was one of about 4 clubs that we were talking about that just need bodies on their roster. We're looking at Chicago. We're looking at the Spirit, right? We're looking at Racing Louisville. Look, who are these franchises looking at in this draft to try to flesh out some of their rosters? And while Chicago has a deep need for midfielders at this moment, they might have shown their hat a little bit ahead of this draft by announcing a signing of a midfielder in Addie McCain. So who do you think they might take at number 7? We think here at A3 that they actually might go with a forward, and we think they might go with Penelope Hawking out of Penn State. And perhaps maybe we can make a case here at this selection in number 7 for other positions for the Red Stars as well. Will they stay with the forward? Do they want a versatile forward? Is somebody like Riley Mattingly Parker out of Alabama available at this point? Is there another Alabama player and somebody like Raina Reyes available at this point, a defender in this selection? Do you think Chicago can go wrong choosing any of these players at this point?
No, honestly, I can. And that's why doing these mock drafts is tricky when we get to 6, 7, 8, 9, because these teams, it first of all, it depends who's left, right? At this point, if Izzy Diakia is still available, I think Chicago is going to pick her up, right? If Emily Madrill is still available, I think that we could see North Carolina, Chicago, Houston pick up a player like that. So it becomes tricky and more down to the specific tendencies of a player and the specific needs of a team. And someone like Hawking, out of Penn State, she a fifth year at Penn State. She played at West Virginia previously, or excuse me, she played at Virginia previously, or USC. And this is a player that can score goals. And I think when you couple that alongside someone like Mallory Pugh, it could be really beneficial for a team like Chicago to get that, especially heading into a World Cup year where you need players to step up and to score goals. And we talked about how Chicago is an incredibly young team. They were last year. And now that so many young players last year will be in their second year, I think that they will have so much to teach someone like a Hawking coming into this team. So I agree with Hawking, Penelope Hawking going here. And I also agree with Alexa Spanstra out of Virginia going to North Carolina at number 6. I think that Spanstra is a player, a forward that can help this team out in North Carolina, because losing Debinha, they've got to score some goals, and someone like Spanstra can create, she can score goals. So I think Spanstra at 6 and then Penelope Hawking at 7 for Chicago.
Let's take a look at number 8 for Houston Dash and who they could possibly select here at this position. We're actually going to go with Messiah Bright, the forward out of TCU. Listen, we're fans of this player, thought she had a great career with TCU. And when we're looking at Houston, this is another team that has made some announcements of not maybe so much big free agency signings, but they did kick off their offseason bringing back Sophia Smith, bringing back Alyssa Chapman, and they recently made announcements that they have a new contract with Prysock, and they also announced that they re-signed midfielder Emily Ogle. So there's some things that they have done here leading up to the draft that I'm curious about how they're going to navigate at this position. I'm also very curious how they're going to navigate the loss of somebody like a Nichelle Prince, someone who's currently navigating an injury that is a huge piece of their attack. And I think a good way they could try to help navigate that is by drafting Messiah Bright.
Completely agree. Messiah Bright is one of the best number 9s, one of the best strikers coming out of this draft. Out of TCU, 49 career goals throughout her college career. She became TCU's all-time leader in career points in 2021, took the team to 5 straight NCAA tournaments. She elevated TCU. And I think when you look at a team like Houston Dash, this is a team that made their first NWSL playoffs in 2022. They're looking to repeat. They're looking to grow. And to find a striker that is going to be a through and through striker, it allows for someone like Shea Groom to have a little bit more freedom on the pitch, to push up higher out of the midfield, because you know you're going to have Messiah Bright stretching really high. I mean, playing alongside someone like Maria Sanchez, Ebony Salmon, like imagine that partnership, adding into the mix someone like Bright. I think that at number 8, this is a really good pick for Bright. And it's also one of the best picks at this point, right? You go highest for a team like Houston Dash and kind of what's left on the board. And Messiah Bright is no scrap to be left on the board. And Houston's going to gobble her up as soon as they can.
Let's chat a little bit more about North Carolina Courage at number 9. Who could they take at number 9? They acquired this selection from San Diego via a trade last year. And if this player is available still, we believe that they are going to make the selection for Tori Hansen, the defender out of UNC.
I agree. I think this player for UNC has that homegrown feel that can provide for North Carolina. Sean Nahas, he has been a profound coach throughout the North Carolina system and the entire state, and understanding Anson Dorrance and what he's been able to do at UNC. A player like Tori Hansen as a defender, she's also local. She's from Raleigh. I think that this would be a really good grab for North Carolina, maybe a little bit higher than other people thought for this defender. But I think you have to stick with what you know, and North Carolina can definitely shore up their back line, right? They've already gotten a pick a little bit earlier. We went with Alyssa Sandra, the forward. So now they go with the defender, really tighten in both ends of their lineup.
Number 10, Kansas City Current on the board. Look, we opened up this entire episode talking a whole ton about Kansas City Current and the fact that they landed Debinha in the free agency sweepstakes. So what are their teammates? Who could they even target here? They've got a ton of midfielders in the mix heading into 2022. They've got a pretty good attacking line, especially now that they've added somebody like Debinha. So who could be the best player available here at this selection if they're looking to perhaps add some depth to their roster? I'm curious if Kansas City Current even stays in this number 10 selection with all of the recent moves that they made. But in the event that they stay here, we're going to go with Reina Reyes, the defender / midfielder out of Alabama, going at number 10 to Kansas City Current in the hopes that they're looking to perhaps add some depth for their back line.
Sandra, I think it's so important that you said if Kansas City stays at number 10, because we're doing this mock draft on Tuesday, so 2 days before the draft actually happens on Thursday. And I could foresee Kansas City making a trade for a later pick, giving this to another team, perhaps that wants to be a little bit higher. I'm looking at someone like Washington Spirit that could make a move to get into the first round. That would behoove a team like Washington Spirit. But if Kansas City stays in this position, they're going to go after Reina Reyes out of Alabama. This is an incredible, incredible player. Mac Herman Trophy semifinalist. She was the SEC Defender of the Year, but she can also score goals. And I think when you look at Kansas City roster and what they're made up of, it's a lot of talented players that have specific positions that they prefer, or maybe that they've been played in most traditionally, but they also float around a lot. I'm specifically looking at someone like an Alex Luera, who was a rookie for Kansas City last year. She played defender all throughout college, and she got to Kansas City. She talked with Matt Potter, and she was like, hey, listen, I want to score goals. I want to get higher. Put me up the field, see what happens. And by the end of it, she's starting in the midfield for the NWSL championship. Reina Reyes is a very similar player to Alex Luera, and that defensively, she's locked down. Defender of the Year. She can keep shutouts like the best of them, but also if you push her higher on set pieces, stretch her into the attacking end of the field, she's going to find a way to get on the end of it. It's that ruthless type of player that's got just a nose and a high IQ of understanding of the game of soccer. And it's someone that would fit really well into Matt Potter's system.
Yeah. 100% agreement. We've got two more selections to make. Let's go with number 11, North Carolina Courage. This acquired from a trade, Kansas City, that took place last year. So North Carolina sitting at number 11. Look, they've got similar to 2022 when they had multiple picks in this first round. North Carolina has found themselves in a similar position in 2023's draft. So curious about who they're going to make at this selection this late in the first round. Who are those players at this point are the best players that you consider available on the board? Those players that you think might go in the first round, but had the potential to drop in the second round. And we are going to go with another forward for North Carolina in Riley Mattingly Parker out of Alabama in this slot as well. I think we have to take a look at this point in terms of the picks that we've given to North Carolina thus far in this first round. So we went forward at number 6 with Alyssa Sandra. We went defender with Hanson at number 9. And now at 11, we're going with another forward in Riley Mattingly Parker out of Alabama. Some versatility, I think, too, with this player. I think she could play across the line if they really want to take the gamble and try to, push some development there. I think coming off of the season that North Carolina had, when you had this sort of breakout season by Diana Ordonez, when you sort of had this big international player kind of come in and sort of announce her arrival in Caroline, who's going to slot in along these players and who can sort of continue to sort of keep that kind of high octane sort of attack going. We know that Debinha was a big part of that for this team, and it's going to be tough to try to replace a player of that caliber. And alongside that, you've got two players who are not going to go into a sophomore season with North Carolina Courage. So how's that going to look like, or what is that going to look like moving forward? So I think don't be surprised if North Carolina maybe wants to choose or add on some extra attackers into the mix for their team moving forward.
Yeah, and I even think with Riley Matlinger Parker being at 11, it's a little low for a player of this caliber, because went to the College Cup with Alabama, Mac Herman Trophy semifinalist. She was an All-American, SEC Forward of the Year. She's a scholar. I think that she'll fit in really well at North Carolina because, as you mentioned, she can play across the front line. You could even drop her a little bit deeper if you needed to. She's got a lot of versatility in her skill and what she's able to do. She's a head down and fight for it. Like, this was, I think I could also, like, between Kansas City going with Rena Reyes and then North Carolina with Matling Parker, I could see that flip almost a little bit, but I like to keep Rena Reyes as a defender with Kansas City Current, but I'm really excited to see how high this player goes. But I think North Carolina would be a really good pick for Parker as a forward heading into this league. I mean, they lost Debinha. They've got to shore up. They've got to have a little bit of depth. You're going to lose Caroline at the World Cup. You're going to lose some of these other players during World Cup time and international play.
Let's close out this first round and our mock draft at number 12. Portland Thorns have the final selection of the first round. And listen, we chatted about the middle area of this draft order. We think there might be some movement come draft day. So I'm a little curious as if we're correct in predicting that maybe there could be some movement in those middle selections. And what would that mean for this final selection for the Thorns in this category? And in the event that they still need a defender, we're going to stick with it. We're going to go with Alyssa Harris, the defender, a center back out of South Carolina. Listen, I'm just going to echo my sentiments from that earlier selection in the event that this is the position that they want to target. Got to have depth along that back line. You're going to miss somebody like a Becky Sauerbrunn, who is likely going to a World Cup at this point. I don't think that would be a shocker if folks saw the 37-year-old captain going to the World Cup. And then you're going to, have a large window of time there to where maybe you're going to need some depth to slot in to those positions. And we're coming off of a season for Portland where we saw somebody like an Emily Menges have to navigate various injury, right? A player who's also in a different stage and phase of her career. So they're definitely going to have to start looking at some areas to provide depth in that position specifically. And I think Harris is a good option at this point on the board at the final selection in the first round.
Yeah, I agree. I think Portland Thorns taking a player like Alyssa Harris out of South Carolina is going to be a huge move. And you talked about how versatile Harris is because she can play across the back line. Center back is her main role, but she can also play higher up the pitch. And I think with Portland, we could see her being floated around a little bit to fill a hole where it's needed, whereas traditionally her role will be in the center back. Will she get there initially? I'm not sure. Maybe they'll start her on the outside or start her a little higher up the field. But Harris is a 4-time conference All-American. She brings a lot of depth. She brings a lot of talent to this Portland side. And if Portland stays at this number 12 pick, they should go with Harris. So Portland's got a number 5 pick in which they're going to take Emily Madrill, another defender formerly with FSU that went to play professionally. And now they're going with Alyssa Harris, a defender, a center back out of South Carolina to close out the first round. And that's if Portland stays here. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, Sandra. I could foresee Portland making a trade, Kansas City making a trade out of that number 10 spot. Maybe we'll see a team like Washington Spirit somehow wiggle their way into this first round to get one of these top 12 draft prospects. There's definitely a lot of moving parts to come, but this is a pretty good round out about where everything is for now.
I'm excited about it. That's it for our mock draft. We just wanted to do the first round for everyone. And Lisa and I are going to be in Philly for the 2023 NWSL draft. So we're going to see firsthand how hit or miss we were in this mock draft order. I'm excited for chaos. I think we're always excited to see some movement around this day. And it's an exciting event in general. And it's very, very cool that the NWSL draft is returning to a live and in-person event for the first time since 2020. We can't wait to participate in it. Thanks everybody for joining us today and always listening to Attacking
for our
Third.
massive episode. There's so much we covered. So thanks everyone for sticking around if you made it this far.
Honestly, I'm pretty sure this might be our longest episode ever, but shout out to the league and everyone for announcing everything on Monday. And now we were forced to talk about it today alongside our mock draft episode. Listen, if you like what we do here, make sure you download, follow, listen to us anywhere you get your podcast. You can watch us, subscribe, youtube.com/attacking third, like, follow, subscribe, leave those comments. We want to hear from you. The NWSL draft is Thursday, January 12th. Watch it across CBS Sports platforms, CBS Sports Network, Paramount Plus, and CBS Sports HQ. We'll have your previews, your live coverage, your recaps, everything on A3. For Sandra, Herrera, and Lisa Roman, this was Attacking Third.